The next session is going to be moderated by Mr. George Okuto. Mr. George Okuto is the director of the International Labour Organization country offices for Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique. Mr. George Okuto, you have the floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Babatunde, for the excellent moderation, and also for the panelists for the very inciting discussion on a subject that has always been very difficult on the physical space. But I think you have provided very good leading way forward. Session 3 is basically the way forward. How do we move from the 17.8% to 40%? And before we table some of the issues that has come out from this very rich discussion, allow me to kind of put forward the key messages that has come out from the conversation that we have had this morning. And there are 7 key messages that we have filtered out. One is that the informal economy, the formal employment is by far the main source of income and employment in Africa, accounting for 85.8% of all forms of employment, and nearly 9 out of 10 young workers. This population is highly vulnerable to poverty, low earnings, and irregular incomes. They are not covered by social insurance that are available to a few in the formal labor economy. And neither are they covered by social assistance given to those in extreme poverty and vulnerability. 2, the international labor standards clearly support the importance of extending social protection coverage, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Social Protection Flows Recommendation 202, and the transition from informal to the formal economy recommendation number 204. 3, there are many regional policies, strategies, and statements which reflect inclusive social protection as an important instrument to eradicate poverty and promote inclusive, sustainable development, in particular, the AU SPIRE work and the AU Agenda 2063. 4, the barriers to social protection coverage for workers in the informal economy include their exclusion from legal coverage, the cost of insurance and inflexible financing arrangements, complex and burdensome administrative procedures, weak enforcement of or incentives to participate in the voluntary schemes, lack of information, awareness and trust, weak representation and organization, and weak coordination. 5, that successful examples of extension of social security coverage to workers in the informal economy have focused mainly on 2 broad policy approaches. 1 is the extension of social protection through formalization, focusing on facilitation of access of workers in the informal economy to existing social insurance schemes by change in legislation, adoption of measures to remove administrative bottlenecks to contribution, and adopting contribution rates and benefit packages, and harnessing linkage to other policy areas. And the extension of social security to informal workers through a combination of non-contributory and contributory mechanisms. On the physical space, which is number 6, that there are relevant options for increasing the physical space for social protection in each African country, including increasing the social security contribution, reallocating expenditures, raising tax revenue. Of course, we have had a contribution, again, raising tax revenue per se, rather than increasing the tax base, allocation of earmarked access to social protection, innovative financing, and as well as the official development assistance. And the seventh message is that national social dialogue with the government, including the ministers of finance, employers, workers, as well as civil society, and others, is fundamental to generate the political will to exploit all possible physical space options available in each country and adopt an optimal mix of public policies for social protection. These are the few things that I think we have picked up from as the key messages from the conversation that we have had. And from these messages, we have also outlined a few as the way forward. And I would like also to put this on the table. One, that we should develop and implement a social protection coverage acceleration program in each country. In other words, we need to domesticate this acceleration program in each country, taking into account the national priority strategies and particular situation. Two, to establish a regional financing facility for accelerating social and health protection coverage. Three, establish African community of practice on the extension and financing of social protection, as well as a coalition of partners to promote this agenda. The e-Campus that you have already accessed will be a tool for creating this community of practice, and it will be available to all the participants on a permanent basis, so you can be able to communicate among ourselves. Four, we should organize annual dialogue to discuss progress toward 40% social protection coverage in Africa by 2025. Five, develop an engagement framework with the government, international financial institution, private sector actor, multilateral agencies on inclusion of comprehensive social protection in their funding priority for Africa. Six, develop and spearhead a social protection data initiative for Africa. Seven, develop a regional capacity development strategy on the extension of social protection. And eight, we have to create a regional business network for social protection, as well as a regional workers network for social protection. These are the points that I think from the risk discussion is really setting us the stage of how we can move forward. But I would like at this point to invite some three speakers whom I would like to give their own perspective of how we see us moving forward. And it is my pleasure at this point to invite the Minister of Public Service and Labor of the Republic of Rwanda, Madame Fanfan Ranyindo, to have the floor. Madam Minister, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to join you today at this regional dialogue on accelerating social protection coverage and sustainable financing in Africa. As you may be aware, for the 27th time, yesterday, Rwanda started the commemoration week of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. Since 1994, social protection programs have played a significant role in building back a country that was totally devastated. From 1994 to 2005, social protection interventions were provided in forms of humanitarian assistance. In 2005, the first social protection policy was adopted, and ever since, the sector evolved from humanitarian assistance and fragmented intervention to a more coordinated social protection program, contributing to national development while also addressing new emerging challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded all of us of the necessity of having a more inclusive and comprehensive social protection. The organization of this dialogue is therefore very well timed, especially at this time when the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted livelihoods, affecting both formal and informal sectors of the economy. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Over the last decades, Rwanda has pursued various efforts aimed at expanding social protection coverage and financing. This was done in line with our national policies and both regional and international policy commitments. To underscore its commitment, the government of Rwanda adopted an updated national social protection policy in 2019. First, the policy reaffirmed the commitment to a comprehensive social protection system grounded in the following values: inclusive development, self-reliance, citizen participation, service delivery, excellence, and national solidarity. Second, the policy sought to pursue a more comprehensive vision for social protection that comprises social security, short-term social assistance, social care services, and targeted livelihood and employment support. Additionally, the policy, along with its implementation strategy, brought about a number of policy innovations to address long-standing challenges associated with the following key issues: coverage, effectiveness, responsiveness to vulnerability and shocks, institutional capacity, harmonization within the sector, and coordination with policies and programs outside of the sector. Rwanda has pursued great effort in ensuring universal health coverage for its citizens. The most popular health coverage, a hallmark of our health coverage, is the community-based health insurance. Presently, the community-based health insurance covers more than 85% of the population, including a big portion of persons in the informal economy. The remaining are members of other medical insurance schemes. The overall coverage is at 85.99%. Its financing has been sustained by contribution from the financing of the community-based health insurance has been from members of and various subsidies from government as well as the private sector through various taxes and fees collections. We cannot achieve inclusive social protection in Africa if the informal economy is left behind. However, the nature of the informal economy requires that specific social protection schemes are specifically designed for the informal economy. For example, in 2017, the government of Rwanda established a long-term savings scheme, locally known as EJO, HESA. In English, it's a bright future. The scheme was designed with a particular aim of providing social protection coverage to the informal sector operators. Persons who can have saving accounts in this long-term savings scheme include the following: self-employed person working in the informal sector, wishing to make long-term savings, and workers operating in the informal sector, wishing to make long-term savings. The scheme covers savings and pension needs with the ultimate aim of helping all Rwandans and foreigners living in Rwanda to get pensions and live a dignified old age life. The member of the long-term savings scheme pays a contribution depending on his or her capacity. The government may contribute to the promotion of the long-term savings scheme with a view to encourage the community to join the scheme. After 3 years, both the membership and amount of contribution have never ceased increasing. What this tells us is that we can come up with innovative and practical social protection ideas that can solve many issues in terms of coverage, affordability, and financing. With regard to financing, social protection programs can be financed from a mixture of domestic revenues, grant from development partners, and concessional borrowing, and emphasis on community involvement and mobilization.
Honorable Minister, you may wish to summarize in a minute. Thank you.
Yes, please. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as I approach my conclusion, I would like to appreciate the momentum that this regional dialogue is creating. We can build on this momentum to build back better from COVID-19 consequences. In closing, allow me to thank the AU and ILO for jointly organizing this regional dialogue. I also wish to reiterate the commitment of the government of Rwanda to the ongoing effort to accelerate social protection coverage and financing in Africa. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that submission, in particularly the information about the introduction of the community-based health insurance and how it is being financed. Thank you very much for your intervention. At this point, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Kwasi Adu Amankwa, the General Secretary of ITUC Africa. Mr. Amankwa, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much.
And you have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Okuto. I will stay within the 5 minutes because I think most of the essential things have been said for this meeting. Let me just express my very sincere appreciation to the ILO for organizing this platform, this regional dialogue, and for associating the AU fully and giving us an opportunity to recognize fully the importance of social protection at a critical time like this in our history. Of course, if we look at the ILO and the instruments that have been referred to earlier in this meeting, they were instruments that have been developed many years. I mean, you take the Convention 102, which is a basic one on social protection, social security, and it's coming from as far back as 1952. And then you take the recent recommendation on 202, it comes from 2012. And then the more recent one on formalizing the informal economy comes from 2015, which means that already the ILO has been seized with this. But then, of course, it's taking a pandemic like this and the obvious challenge that it has posed to us around the world for us to pay the kind of attention that we're paying to it. So thank you for highlighting social protection now in this period and pointing out the connection between the need for incomes for everybody, the importance of health and a social safety net to assure the dignity of the human person. I think going forward, we must be pushing all of our countries, particularly our governments, who have taken more or less a contract to offer leadership to align their policies and laws with these instruments which have been long recognized as instruments which can lead us to social protection. So I'm talking about those who have not ratified 102 to ratify it, and then for those who need support to implement recommendations 202 and 204 to seek that appropriate support. It's been pointed out the interconnection between the SDGs and social protection. Meanwhile, we know that all of us, or most of our countries, have committed to the SDGs. So we need to align our policies and measures in order to be able to move in the appropriate direction. Reference has been made to SPIWEC, which is a flagship program of the AU on social protection for rural economies and informal economy workers. And again, this is something that our countries will have to take a fresh look at. I think a lot of the discussion was on financing, and without having to repeat it, I think a number of very important elements have come out. The fact that we should be looking more at non-contributory schemes for the informal economy. And I should say that the informal economy is there by default. It is there because people cannot afford not to do anything. They just have to do something to survive. So incomes there are very precarious and they are low. And reaching out to the informal economy is playing the role of empowering. And we must see that, as was pointed out, I think, by the UNDP representative, as a key means of empowering large sections of our population. So the non-contributory schemes are important, but we need the financing for that. And I think the range of tax measures have come out on natural resources, on alcohol and tobacco, on inheritance, on stopping or mitigating illicit financial flows, all as ways, and cutting down on tax exemptions and the rest, all as ways of raising the tax revenues that enables our governments to do what they have to do in respect of our populations. And of course, beyond the domestic resources, the importance of global support, which was highlighted by both the IMF and the World Bank, has come out properly. I think the most important for us is the question of political will and the fact that we should be going at this as a coalition of the willing. Our governments must commit fully to it because, again, now, from the International Trade Union perspective and from the African Trade Union perspective, we are talking about a new social contract in which our governments see more responsibility in paying attention to the needs of the population. So a coalition of the willing in which there is more fight against corruption and our people align themselves, commit government policy fully to serving the people. The importance of the fight against corruption is extremely essential for making sure that the resources are available. And we will need some kind of peer review, coalition of the willing in which people come voluntarily to the table to join this network that moderator you pointed out to, but then people submit themselves to be assessed. We set targets. We have talked about 40% in 5 years, that is by 2025. And if we are going to be reviewing this annually, it means that we must set targets and people must be held to the targets that they themselves commit to. I believe that the political will is extremely important. We know as unions, social protection, equity are things that we have been seized with since our very beginning, but we also need the support of other sections of the population to realize what is important for us. So we welcome this dialogue in which everybody, employers, governments, multilateral institutions, everybody seems to be highlighting on this. And we hope that we'll go forward, reaching out more strongly to each other, providing the space for all workers, including the informal economy workers, to come to the table so that together we can explore more fully the possibilities for achieving social protection for all. On our part, we stand committed fully to offer all the necessary support and input for the achievement of social protection for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ITUC Africa. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Timothy Olowale, the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. Mr. Timothy, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. Let me start by reiterating that social protection is a right for all workers. Therefore, informal workers have the same rights as formal workers to healthy and safe working conditions and to have access to social protection schemes. Such programs should be designed to reach as many workers as possible. On the way forward, which is the aspect that we've been asked to focus on, to enhance the sustainability of social protection schemes, I will propose as follows. I will just deal with the bullet points because of our time. Number one, let me identify that we are not in short of legal framework or international conventions or standards on the subject, or even national policies in Africa. Our shelves are replete of them. We have all these national policies that we have developed through talk shops like this in time past. There's the need for the reviews of those policies and legal frameworks and existing conventions so that we work on diligent implementation, because implementation is basically the crux of the shortcomings in Africa. Secondly, let me also advocate for the development of a far-reaching social protection policy framework to provide clear institutional roles and responsibility, which will guide social protection design and implementation at the federal and state levels of our economy. In other words, all stakeholders in the economy must have clearly spelled out roles in the social protection policy framework to be developed. There must be no ambiguity on what our responsibility and roles are as stakeholders in the society. Thirdly, the absence or paucity of necessary data on the informal sector remains likely, which remains likely uncaptured, constitute a major obstacle to extending social protection to workers in the informal sector in Africa. Therefore, compilation of a national database that captures the demography of all citizens to ensure that social protection benefits get to the informal and rural economic participants is very, very imperative. And number 4, I will also say that to resolve the absence of adequate awareness and sensitization about social protection in the informal and rural economy, there is the critical need for the utilization of relevant government institutions or agencies, like for instance in Nigeria, we have the National Orientation Agencies, which is responsible for social awareness and sensitization to create higher awareness on social protection programs and benefits to citizens where they exist. Because even the much that has been implemented in Africa, you discover that citizens are not even aware of them, and they are in the dark as to how to access these benefits. Citizens should be able to access the available social protection programs and benefits without unnecessary and avoidable bureaucracy. In other words, red tapeism is a hindrance. 5, social protection programs should be transparent to all stakeholders and equitable. Let me close by giving a word of caution on the issue of creating more taxes, especially targeting the employers of labor or organized businesses, as this will have a negative impact of raising the cost of doing business and naturally the passage of the attendant costs to customers, most of which are in the informal sector, therefore reducing their purchasing power. Rather, I will advocate widening the tax net to capture those that are evading taxation or either to uncaptured individuals or corporate bodies. This is the way to go. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timothy Olowale, for those very enriching contribution and guidance. I want to, on behalf of everyone, to thank the 3 panelists who have really added more guidance and concrete examples of what can be done to move the agenda forward. That takes us to the closing of the meeting for today, but as I indicated, you are going to constitute part of the community of practice. We need to continue this conversation outside this meeting as well through the e-campus that has been established. So please take full use of that platform.